Welcome back everyone to Gotcha Interact. Today we're going to be talking about our brand new weapon that we have for Escoffier, looking at a few different things, looking at first and foremost, is it good for Escoffier, obviously, but then also we're going to be looking at each and every character that could possibly be used with. We know especially with Genshin, with the weapon banners, this can be kind of dropped even if you're going after the other weapon in the banner, so we kind of want to talk about what other characters could it possibly be good for or used for at the very least, if you happen to drop it accidentally and you don't have Escoffier. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into the video. So the first character obviously we have is going to be Escoffier herself. Now obviously this is meant for Escoffier, and technically if we really want to get into the brass tacks of everything, we can kind of go over into the actual weapon and at least refresh your guys' memory at basically what the weapon does. At level 90 it's going to have a 608 base attack with a crit damage of 66.2% at level 90. The ability is going to give an attack increase at R1 by 12%, and then when the equipping character is off the field, attack is increased by an additional 12%. After healing, the equipping character and the healed characters, or character, will obtain the Sweet Echoes effect, increasing their attack by 32% for 3 seconds, and this effect can be triggered even if the equipping character is off field. So we have some healing, but we also have some attack increases, and if the character is off the field, there's another attack increase with a main stat of crit damage. So first and foremost, looking at our first character, obviously Escoffier is meant for the weapon, so we're going to be throwing Escoffier. I think we can both agree, Rift, that Escoffier, her personal weapon, she is going to be here. But after that, we kind of just threw random characters kind of together. The next character we have is Yansan. So what are your thoughts on Yansan, Rift?
Well, with Yansan, I kind of like it. Obviously, once again, if you just kind of have it and you want to use it, Yansan does heal. So she's not only going to be having increased attack from the passive on the weapon, which is going to be good for her personal buffing for other characters, but because she's healing, she's going to give herself even more attack, 32% to be specific, and then also is giving 32% attack to the character that she is healing. So because of that, I actually quite like it on Yansan. Now, that can be, a hot topic maybe, or just that's subjective to my opinion. So if you do plan to have your Yansan do a little bit of damage on top of just her buffing, you're probably doing 4-piece scroll, triple attack percent on the Sands, Goblet, and Circlet, but may also have some, along with the ER of course, crit stats if you want to just make sure you're kind of min-maxing her, which you don't have to do, of course, she is a support. But if you are getting some damage on there, and you have this weapon, obviously as a 5-star has the higher base attack, you're going to have some crit damage in the main stat, so that's going to help out for personal damage, and then just giving even more attack to herself, but once again, the other character that she is healing. So I definitely think it's a good option, to say the least, on Yansan. Definitely, for me, probably would put it in stat stick region at the least. I don't think it's practically useless because of all of that, and she is healing. She's taking full effect of the weapon, essentially. But because she is a support and off-fielder, naturally she might just do better with an ER 4-star weapon, like the event weapon we got most recently. She just does really well with that. She's getting the ER she needs, but also attack percent from the passive. So that's kind of just up to the player at that point. But like I said, if you're going for a damage Yansan, I think this weapon can definitely be used as a stat stick on her.
Yeah, I think that overall, when we look at our 3 different options here, best use is more or less, we're kind of saying a little bit of both. You can fully use the effect of the weapon, but it's also like a pretty good option, maybe a second or third option for the character possibly, if you happen to get the weapon. So I think I would have to agree with the idea of putting her in a stat stick. As much as it would be a good idea, usually with Yansan, you want a little bit more of a supportive route with her. The next character we have is Kachina. Now, Kachina, keep in mind, is going to be based a lot on defense. Crit is really not that much of a necessity unless you have like Favonius on her, which at that point crit rate is more happy than crit damage. So I think pretty easily we can both say I think that Kachina practically puts this in the practically useless field for both of us.
Yeah, she doesn't use attack at all for anything, even if she is a damage dealer.
There's zero healing.
Most people use her for the off-field skill damage, but you obviously can use her on-field. But either way you're going with that playstyle, it's defense for the damage. So the crit damage is nice, but because it's not a lot of defense, I can't say it's good.
Yeah, once again, I think practically useless is the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
After that, we have Emilie. Now, Emilie is an attack scaling character, so she does like the attack, and she also likes to be off-field. So there's two different areas where we start to actually get to use her. She also likes crit as well. Her personal weapon is based off of crit rate. This weapon is crit damage. So you're getting the initial attack buff, and you're getting the off-field attack buff as well, considering Emilie likes to be off-field, plus the crit damage, pretty nice. I would say probably this is going to be a stat stick. You can't get full use out of the effect considering she's not a healer, but I definitely do think that most of the weapon is actually pretty solid, and in my opinion could either be a stat stick or a best use, considering this actually might be second or third place for her personal weapon in my opinion when we look at 5 stars.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you as a stat stick. As a damage dealer, obviously is going to like the attack, like you stated. The crit damage in the main stat's going to be great. Now, she can't heal, obviously, so you are missing out a little bit of attack there for her, and the potential other character that she would be healing if she were healing, but that's not really a loss. You're still getting, 24% attack, and obviously the base attack and main stat of the weapon. So it's going to be good if you accidentally get the weapon and don't have Emilie's personal weapon. I think you can definitely use this on her.
The next character we have is going to be Chevreuse. Now, I think when we had talked about this before, we had kind of done some research, looked at everybody kind of in the past, and then kind of given our initial thoughts to each other a little while ago, or at least yesterday. When we looked at some characters, Chevreuse actually came up in conversation, and at first we were kind of like, at least I was thinking, oh, okay, healer, okay, so she can do it, attack, and then as you start to think more about her as a character, a lot of people still like to use her as a damage dealer as well as a support, and I know Rift, you do that, but I know a lot of people do the Favonius Lance. That's what I do, even at the higher constellation, at the C6, doesn't matter. A lot of people still use her as a damage dealer. They throw on Deathmatch or something. So looking at the specific weapon, the crit damage is nice, especially if you can get a solid crit ratio. The now crit rate obviously is nicer considering it's a higher crit rate. You want to make sure you're critting more often if you're going for damage, but the crit damage is still nice. And then the attack obviously is extremely helpful for her personal damage considering that's what it's based off of. There's no extra HP to help her healing, but she is a healer that can heal other characters that are on field. So that is something to keep in mind as well. And it's also giving her personal attack, so her personal damage, as well as the character that's on field. And her whole point is to make sure she's buffing the on-field character as well. So she's a support that actually could take very good use of this weapon. And in my personal opinion, I think this is her best 5-star weapon actually when it actually releases.
And I would totally agree. And I was just thinking to myself about the healing passive with Chevreuse. That caps out at 40,000 HP, giving 40% max attack. That's the most Chevreuse can give just in her kit. But with this weapon, even if you're doing a damage build, like you said, I do a damage build on my Chevreuse, so I didn't go into HP at all. I wasn't really looking for it. Now, if I had it, great, because I know she can work with that to give attack based on the passive. But I think my Chevreuse sits at 22,000 because she's once again, she's got a crit ratio. I gave her more attack. But still have 22,000, which means I'm still giving 22% attack. Now, if I was using this weapon, because I'm using Deathmatch on her, so I'd have to switch my crit damage circlet to crit rate,
Nice.
and then I'd have the crit damage weapon. If I had this weapon on my Chevreuse, and let's say I still have 22,000 HP, so I'd be giving 22% attack from her passive, but another 32% based on the weapon. And you put those together, and that's like 54%, which is much higher than just a regular HP build on a 4-star. Now, obviously, that's going to be more expensive, but this isn't a scenario that you get Escoffier's weapon on accident. Maybe you were going for the other character on the banner, right? So I definitely would be using this. You're gonna see a lot more personal damage from Chevreuse, which, once again, you've probably heard from other sources that Chevreuse's personal damage is non-negligible, especially if you have you went up to the C6, and I know a lot of players target that. It's really good, but even in the C4, after you use the burst, you can use her hold skill 3 times in a row, and if you do have a damage build, it feels quite nice because on a damage build, like once again, I don't have anything crazy, just Deathmatch 4-piece. I think Crimson is my Chevreuse. Even in the Overload team, she's hitting 40 to 60k on her skill when it crits. So if I'm doing 3 of those back to back, that's a nice little 120, 140
and then what are you doing on
damage.
That burst?
The burst is a little higher, at least 60 to 80k. So it feels really good. It turns her into a sub DPS, but she's still giving a substantial buff to the entire team, not to mention herself. So this weapon would definitely feel really good at the end of the day, and I agree with putting her at the very top here at best use.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because when we had first talked about this, I was actually kind of a little hesitant to her because I wasn't really fully thinking about her kit. And as I talked more about it, you were definitely one to be like, hey, Like, hold up, like, Vixen, calm down, hold up, wait a minute, so let me cook. And
Sorry,
yeah,
I'm the
no,
weird
for sure.
minority with the damage build, so.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree because I was once again I think that when you think of a support, and it doesn't matter how long you've been playing the game, how sure you've been playing the game, it doesn't matter. There are still that's a great thing about talking with other people about this stuff though, is that you can still get to see another angle of things. And so when I was thinking about Chevreuse, I was thinking in my personal account, I really like to have the high ER. My entire team, no matter what, because of all the particle creation from her crit hits and everything with Favonius, I'm making sure I'm always critting. I'm always getting like a really good set bonus. Like all these things are really kind of tying in together and kind of perfect. And so my mind is always thinking, good things with like that idea. Now keep in mind, if you're using Chevreuse on an Arlecchino overload, Arlecchino can't be healed by anybody else but herself. So technically, this weapon would not be good with Chevreuse on an Arlecchino team. Keep that in mind. Also, the same thing if you are going to use 4-piece Song of Days Past on Chevreuse, but that's kind of a Chevreuse specific video because once again, Arlecchino can't be healed by outside resources, has to be by herself. So anything that's based off of healing doesn't directly go to her. So keep that in mind when you are using the weapon with, if you're saying, I want to get this weapon, I did get the weapon, and I want to put her on an Arlecchino team, keep in mind that this you're dropping off that that healing thing as well. Now, if you happen to heal one of the other characters on field, maybe let's say you do Ion-san or Yaimiko or Fischl or even Bennett right before your other character or your DPS or something, or like Arlecchino, and you heal some other character, that then would still trigger. So there is still a possibility for it to trigger. I'm just saying that if you're using it specifically with Arlecchino and you do her hold skill right before Arlecchino, you're not able to heal the other characters because you're going right to Arlecchino basically. Anyways,
Right.
now that we're gonna jump past the Chevreuse and saying Arlecchino 17,000 times, now let's go to talk about our next character, which is Candace. Now, Candace is a little bit of a rough spot for me because I insta-built Candace, but with Candace specifically, it is a very rough weapon to even think about to put on her. The crit is practically useless. You could go for a damage Candace here, and I know that people do that. So that's kind of where we have to think, right? A lot of this has to think about damage, no matter what, because of the crit, because of all the attack. So Rift, what are you thinking? Because this takes away from her shield capabilities, but what does it do for her damage specifically?
I'll keep it short and sweet. You can use this if you have a damaged Candace, like a DPS Candace, which is what I do. 4-piece Nymph Stream is actually pretty fun with Candace and just a thing to do. She can clear floor 11. She definitely can't clear floor 12, but it's fun to do some floor 11 clears with a Candace kind of as the on-field, as a substitute to like Ayano or Child. Feels pretty fun, feels pretty good. So if you have this weapon, you can throw it on her for that. Now, I will say for DPS Candace, I still think Staff of Homa is going to be better just because it has the added HP scaling to give her more attack. And so because Candace likes that as someone who likes to use HP to buff other characters, but in this case herself, for normal attack damage bonus in her passive, that still is going to be better. Has the same crit damage, same base attack, so it feels better because she's also not healing anyone, so she's not getting the extra attack. It's really just, hey, here's 12% more attack, because in a DPS Candace team, obviously you're on field with Candace, so she's not getting the extra attack if she's off field. So it's literally just 12% attack in the passive versus Staff of Homa, you're getting a lot more.
Yeah, so I guess where would we put her then? Practically useless, or does she deserve the
I would
ability
still
to
put it
be
in
stat
stat because if you have it and you don't have Staff of Homa and you want to do it, it's there, but specifically only for DPS Candace.
Okay, so we're gonna probably keep her at the lower end of stat stick.
Yeah.
Do we think that Ion-san is above Emilie? Is that a pretty fair usage, or do we think Emilie is above
I
Ion-san?
personally like Ion-san above Emilie just because
Just because of the
Ion-san
healing
can take
ability.
the full effect. She's going to be able
Right.
to heal, which means she's giving herself more attack and whoever else she's healing.
So the
Just
next
me personally.
character we have is Sino. So Sino, once again, I think just goes to a stat stick. I think has to
Yeah.
be placed right next to Emilie. The attack increase, once again, now off field, I think he's lower because he can't get
Yes, I was
use
gonna
of the
say.
attack like from the off field. So all you're really getting is the main stat stick, and then you're also getting the attack percent and the ability from the first little bit. That's practically
That's exactly where I'd put him. So
okay. And then Mika. I mean, I'm gonna throw him right above practically useless. Maybe, I don't know. It's either practically useless, and the only reason is because
Yeah.
its attack and he's not a damage dealer. No matter how you can try to splice it, it's really hard to make him a damage dealer. So I think he goes above Kachina because technically he can still, at the very least, heal other characters, therefore giving them an attack buff, but that is all that you're getting out of this weapon.
Part of me wants to put him at the bottom of stat stick because he is a healer that scales on attack. So he actually does like the attack he's getting from this. The higher base attack being a 5-star.
So
but
hard
the
to
only
even
reason
think
I
about.
don't want to put him, the only reason I don't want to put him there though, is because of all these other characters you're going to have that are just going to be able to use it better. Like, for example, Yansan. Obviously, Candace is another niche one we just talked about, but Yansan would just like this better.
Right.
Once again, Mika can use it, but I'm still going to, for me personally, put him at the top of practically useless because of just other characters that are going to better use it.
Now, an interesting one I would have to say, and I'm going to immediately put it here, and we can talk about it in a second, is Arlecchino. Now, I'm not putting her here just because I absolutely love Arlecchino, which I do. But the thing to keep in mind here is that Arlecchino, we just talked about her earlier, can heal herself. So, technically, she can get the effect in the ability of getting the healing going, which...
Right.
Therefore is giving herself the attack buff. Therefore, my point here is that she can get the attack buff from the healing, and she can get the regular attack buff. She cannot get full effect of the ability, though, considering she can't really be off-field. Or, well, you don't want her to be off-field. And that's kind of another thing to keep in mind, is that, you know, she doesn't really do anything crazy off-field. I know she has her little mark, but that's practically it. So that's really something to keep in mind. So I don't think she can get full use. It is still a quote-unquote stat stick, but because she has the ability to still somewhat use part of the ability, I think she's just on the lower end of best use.
Yeah, I for me, I would put it at, and I'm going to be really picky with this, I just will. I'd put it at top of stat stick because I still like Staff of Homa better. Also, yes, she heals herself, which is great, and you're going to get that extra attack. But there's two things for me. Number one, the extra attack on the weapon, Escoffier's weapon, only lasts for 3 seconds, and I don't know... Yeah, you're going to be able to use that well. If you come into Arlecchino in your rotation and you use the burst first at rotation, then you go into your normals, you're going to have 3 seconds of 32% more attack, and you probably definitely will feel that. That's a lot of attack. The other thing is that I don't like, though, is using Arlecchino's burst at the beginning of rotation. Now, I know that works and everything, but me personally, I prefer using her burst at the end of rotation, right before you switch off and reset up the whole rotation from the start. Again, rinse, repeat. That's just me personally. So, it like you're saying, Vixen, it is the bottom of best use, but for me, top of stat stick, just because... I like Staff of Homa better because it's just easier. You don't have to think about getting that extra buff with Escoffier's weapon. And also you don't have to kind of change your rotation and how you do that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that it comes down to for me is, because we were talking about this yesterday and you were asking because obviously I know you don't have Arlecchino, you were asking, you know, how do you use her rotation like correctly? Do you use it at the beginning? Do you use it at the end? And I was like, well, you would use her burst at the end, towards the end. The biggest thing is you're trying to use that to heal yourself for the next rotation, but also technically if your buffs are long enough, and the certain characters have long enough buffs, technically the burst is resetting your elemental skill cooldown, so technically you could use your skill, go through some damage phase, and then as soon as you get lower bond of life, use your burst and then use your skill again and go through a little bit more of a damage phase as well. So that's why I still keep her at the bottom of best use, because there still is a little bit towards the end of her rotation where you can still make that 3 seconds worth it. And it about makes sense with how long the other buffs in the, usually like an overload team at this point, would usually be used, or even like a vaporized team, even those buffs kind of go on for a very long time. The characters like Xilonen or whatever, like those applications and buffs and everything go on for an extremely long period of time, and Arlecchino likes to be on field for a very long period of time. So you're using the burst towards the end, but you're technically, if you want to get the best use out of her, you're not using it as her very last thing. Now I know you can, I'm not saying you can't, but the whole point of the burst is, yes, healing, but it's also to reset the skill cooldown. So that's also something I just want to make sure that we keep in mind, which is why I think at the end of the day, I still put her at the bottom of best use because of that. Now, I know there are other better weapons, but that's my kind of point. The next character we have, though, is Rosaria. So how do you feel about Rosaria?
I think it's pretty easy with her. It's really just a stat stick here. Rosaria has pretty good scalings. I feel like, honestly, she might be a character that just gets overlooked nowadays. If you use Rosaria, you definitely, for those of you watching, know how valuable she can be, especially in things like theater. She is a damage dealer. She's a sub DPS, and that's really what she brings to the table, as well as bringing just extra crit rate to the table as well. She feels really good. I'd say for her, because she is a damage dealer, she really is going to like this. She scales well on the attack. She's going to like the crit damage, the extra attack percent. Also, because she's an off-fielder, she's getting the additional 12%, so she's getting a guaranteed 24%. Now, she's not healing, so she's not getting that extra 32%, but like I said, you're getting 24% attack in the passive plus the crit damage main stat. Now, some people will argue that, well, because Rosaria is mainly focused on giving crit rate to your team, you want a crit rate weapon for sure. And while I would kind of agree with that, if you are just focusing on her personal damage, then once again, she's just really going to like this weapon because it's a really good stat stick for her. I would say I like it better than Candace, and I actually like it even better than Sino, but probably not better than Emilie, just because she is an off-fielder getting the extra attack percent. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah,
but
I think the off-field
I kind of want to know your
ability.
opinion.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that she can still use it from off-field. Now, I know Candace technically can use it off-field as well. People do like the Mualani comp or whatever. And technically, Candace could also technically be higher here. But I think because we were looking at specifically DPS Candace, that's probably why she's towards the bottom of stats.
Yeah.
But when we look at Rosaria, I definitely do agree. I think that she has to be above Sino here, but lower than Emilie because specifically Emily's focused on off-field damage. And while Rosaria does have good off-field damage, like you said, the crit rate, desire plus, her not necessarily being the focus of a sub DPS usually is also another thing to keep in mind. So I would so I would have to kind of agree with you there. The next character we have is Shenhe. Now, Shenhe is an off-field character that does everything that she does based off of attack, so high attack is very, very good for her. Even the buffs and whatever that she does can also be based off of it with her stacks of some things. So Shenhe can actually be a pretty good character here. Once again, can't heal, so I think pretty easily we can kind of run through the next few characters. Where do we think Shenhe is? Somewhere probably in here. Now, the stat stick, on the other hand, it's a little rough because usually you want a lot of ER as well as attack on her, but she does have the ability to be a damage dealer from off-field, very similar to Rosaria, but at the same time, the crit is a little bit less useful on her, in my opinion, than Rosaria.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. It's pretty similar to Rosaria because they're just kind of similar characters, but with Shenhe, you value even more just having the higher attack, but also desperately needing the ER. I feel like Rosaria just likes the crit damage main stat more than Shenhe because she's more geared to just being a pure sub DPS, whereas Shenhe is more dedicated buffer, while also being able to deal some damage. So you can have this, but just make sure if you're giving her this, that you're maybe using crit rate, getting a lot of crit rate, but you kind of don't want to do that because you want the attack. Yeah. She really wants the attack and ER, and it's hard to, I guess, not have that over having some crit. It's just, it's diminishing returns. I don't want to, the only reason, I guess what I'm trying to say, the takeaway here is, the only reason I would put this on Shenhe is because it's a 5-star weapon, has the higher base attack, but just make sure that you are getting as much ER as you can in your substats. I definitely would say, I actually like Sino better on this just because of, being an actual DPS. Shenhe just doesn't feel like she should be dealing damage. If you're giving her this, yeah, great, crit damage, but even then, I still wouldn't want to put her on a crit rate circlet, because
even her personal weapon is fully based on high base attack with attack percent as a subset.
Yeah.
And every of the extra abilities or weapons that you would use instead are going to be focused on ER and attack as well. So now the next character we have is Raiden. I think, once again, we're just sitting here in the stat stick kind of range with a lot of these characters.
Low end of attack, low end of stat stick for me, just because no
you need
ER
the high energy,
and you need it.
Yeah, exactly. The high ER necessity, the attack is nice.
The catch is going to be
you could do
better.
some off field of it. Yeah, so I think honestly, probably actually either right above or right below Candace. Just
I actually would put it below Candace in my opinion because the only reason Candace is showing up here is in the context of Candace being DPS mode. When Candace is, you're doing DPS Candace, this works really well for her. I'd say it's more synergistic for DPS Candace than it is for Raiden because Raiden needs that ER, whereas Candace is actually getting a lot of good things out of this, just really isn't getting the healing part of it.
Putting Raiden on a crit weapon is always a little difficult. I know a lot of people still do it and focus on that, and technically it still works, but there is technically, when you're kind of crit fishing, the weapon does work, so I know people are going to still do it. People throw Staff of Homa and Staff of the Scarlet Sands on her to crit fish, but in my personal opinion, I would have to put it on the lower end of stat stick. So now we have Toma. Now Toma is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, HP scaler, especially with his shield. Now I know
Yep.
damage wise, it could be, is it attack or HP with him?
He, for damage, like his straight pyro damage, yeah, it's attack. And he,
Yeah.
even if you guys in comments can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe he ascends with attack percent, which honestly feels very useless for him because you're either using him as a shield bot and you want to
Or-
go full HP, or you're doing the
Burgeon.
Burgeon thing where you just go full Elemental
EM,
Mastery and use Dragon's Bane. So attack percent just never really, in my opinion, feels great on Toma at all.
feel like
I know
it's
he
lower
ascends
than
into
Mika.
it feels practically useless here. I would put him
Yeah.
right there with Kachina. Either side,
Yeah.
I don't really care.
Okay.
It doesn't
Yeah.
feel good.
Next we have Xiangling. Xiangling, I know technically people are going to be like, oh, crit fish, crit fish, crit fish. Okay, Xiangling. And I know we were talking about this yesterday, Rift, and you had really good high hopes for Xiangling. I have her on the lower end of stat stick next to Raiden because the amount of energy that you need for Xiangling to be consistent with her burst as well, even in a double pyro team, is insanely high still. And even
Absolutely.
still, running an ER weapon like the Catch or Engulfing Lightning outclasses almost any other weapon purely because of the energy needs, even with an ER Sans. So I just feel like, personally, this weapon, even though it is very good, I don't know, it's just on the lower end of static for me, purely because of a lot of the issues that it would come up with.
I'd put it right there beside Raiden because they're honestly, when you think about it, very similar.
Doesn't matter.
In what very similar characters as far as they're very similar characters as far as what they want. They both want ridiculously high ER. Because that's just, for, I guess, Xiangling here, what's the point of all of this, the crit damage main stat and all of this extra attack if she can't even get her burst out every rotation?
Exactly.
That's all just wasted stats because you're not even dealing damage. You really just, once again, I'm going to say, hey, just the Catch is actually a better weapon than this because the ER main stat. Also, it's helping out with a lot of burst damage, which, once again, Xiangling and Raiden heavily rely on. That is, like, the biggest part of their kits.
Right, and I'm going to throw her a little bit above Raiden purely because the off-field. So that she can just get that one technical step above her. Now, Xiao is our next character. Xiao is, once again, just another stat stick. There's no off-field capabilities. It's purely the attack. He can't heal. It's, once again, just another straight stat stick character. It is crit, so I think that he's got to be somewhere near the Sino.
Probably around
Emilie,
Sino, yeah, exactly.
And Rosaria.
I put him, like, right next to Sino, but...
It doesn't
I don't know
really
which
matter,
one between the two. They use it pretty equally.
I think they're the exact same. Yeah, They're both crit rate normal main stat weapons on their on their actual weapons. Neither one of them is doing anything really off field, so I think that they're just basically on the same level. Yao is the next character we have, so you can take advantage of the off-field capability, but crit damage is practically useless on her.
Yeah.
And yes, she can heal and she can even do off-field damage, but it's practically useless in the fact that all that is based off of HP. So all the attack is still, once again, useless. So
I'd feel like I put her right beneath Mika. I just like Mika better on this, if we're being honest, because he's actually an attack scaling healer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yunjin is our next character. I mean, Toma, Kachina level, right? Like it just, it's the defense,
just bad.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, no, okay.
So many other characters you should be putting this on.
Yeah. Zhongli is our next character, so I don't know, similar idea, but I think once again lower end of stat stick in my opinion. I don't know. He has the off-field capability, and you can get the burst back. And especially with that off-field capability, like you were talking about, you can still kind of get some extra help. But once again, the healing effect comes in mind, so you can't heal with them unless I think you're C6.
Yeah, C6. And if you're C6 Zhongli, why aren't you using staff?
Yeah,
staff is just going to be better.
Homa.
It's kind of very similar. I feel like earlier I was talking about, I think it was Arlecchino, where it works really well, but I like Staff of Homa better, but then again, that's the question of, do you have it? So it's kind of weird.
Purely talking about this weapon on the character, not looking at what are the other options. We're purely looking at this weapon on this character. Right. So if you drop this weapon and the only other option that you have on your account is Zhongli to use, how would you actually put this on him? And I think at this point he's a stat stick.
It's honestly a pretty good stat stick. I'd put him right next to maybe around Emilie or Yansan, maybe in between. Because yes, as an off-fielder, he's going to be getting the extra attack, but that's really only for him.
I feel like
And
that's pure, like that's a little bit lower than Emilie, because
I
purely
would say
Emilie does
yes, a
so
little
much
lower than Emilie.
off-field damage,
Because
whereas
she's
Zhongli
actually a
is not doing
DPS.
anything off-field. Right.
Right.
And
Zhongli's
she
not
wants to
dealing
do
damage.
off-field damage. Yeah, Zhongli is, yeah.
I think we
So,
found the common ground there.
yeah, exactly, yeah. Now, the last character we have is Hu Tao. Hu Tao, I actually like the weapon same amount as Arlecchino. I don't care if it's above or below Arlecchino. I think that these two use it the exact same. The whole idea is, once again, going back to the exact same, it's the exact same thing I think with Arlecchino. You want to use the burst towards the end, or especially with Hu Tao at the very end of your rotation.
Right.
So yes, she can heal herself, and technically you can go into somewhat of a damage phase at the very end of your rotation for those extra 3 seconds, but it's really not that extremely useful at the end of the day. Once again, a very good stat stick probably for all the attack, and I know people are going to say HP is how she does damage. Technically, you're correct and wrong at the same time. HP turns into attack, and her damage is based off her attack.
Right.
So technically, the attack is still there and useful. I just think it's the exact same as Arlecchino, which is why I'm going to be putting it at the bottom end of best use.
That's exactly where I'd put her, is right below Arlecchino, because I like Arlecchino more on this weapon than I do Hu Tao. I think Hu Tao sees even more damage loss using her burst at the beginning of rotation. Any Hu Tao main knows what I'm talking about, because you want
lose all the healing as well.
Yeah, exactly. You want to get in like 7 or 8 charged attacks and then snapshot the burst at the end of that, so that you're still getting the damage buff from having used her skill. It's kind of like slightly extending her damage. Once again, Hu Tao mains know what I'm talking about. But yeah, Arlecchino can definitely get away and have less diminishing returns using her burst at the beginning or even the middle of her damage phase, just to extend that, kind of like you were talking about. Whereas Hu Tao just can't.
Whereas Hu Tao, at the end of the day, you just using the burst at the very end is what you want to do, and then swapping off her.
I'd
is
still
after
do
you
it
use
even
the
with
burst.
this weapon, to be honest.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's
not
good.
Really
it's really
that
good.
worth
Stat
it.
stick.
You're probably hurting yourself rather than helping yourself by trying to do something afterwards and get the little bit of damage help afterwards.
That's what makes me want her to be at the top of stat stick, if I'm being honest, because even with it, I don't want to use my burst first. So
Yeah,
I don't. It doesn't feel
technically
like it doesn't feel like best use. It just feels like stat stick. If I'm being, it's a great stat stick. So
Yeah,
like
no, that's
top
fair.
of stat stick.
Yeah, because once again, with I don't think I can say it enough. That's the thing with the buffs that go with Arlecchino. You still can make use of using her burst between the halfway and 3/4 mark of her rotation. And if anything, that's actually what I do. I usually use her burst whenever you get to lower HP. That's really what you're trying to do. So if you get knocked around a lot, you can push it to the halfway mark of your rotation and still use your elemental skill cooldown to then get your skill back. As well, if you have the C2, that's also helping you out with more damage. By putting your burst at the very last thing you do, technically with Arlecchino, it's actually hurting you rather than helping you. Whereas with Hu Tao, like you said, it's helping you rather than hurting you. So that's why I think, that's pretty fair. I think that cutoff purely comes at the idea of
if anything, honestly, I'd put it like
S and B or A tier.
Yeah, if anything, I'd put it under Emilie, if I'm being honest, because because Emily's getting that off-field attack buff, whereas Hu Tao's not.
That's true.
That's just
and
my
Yanson's
opinion.
Still getting the healing as well. No, that's fair. So we'll put the parlor members together. There we go. Then we can find some common ground there. All right, well, that's probably our tier list in and of itself for this brand new weapon that it's come out. We've looked at basically Escoffier all the way back to the very beginning of the cast for all of our polearm characters. Let us know what you guys would do maybe differently, maybe where you guys think maybe are these 3 characters going to be the best use for the weapon. Obviously, Escoffier's top probably is going to be her personal weapon. It's going to be the best. But do you think that there are some other characters maybe that should have been put in best use? Do you think that some of the characters should have been put in different places? Let us know down in the comments. If you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Thank you guys once again so much for watching the video though, and we'll see you guys in the next one.